Chinese President Xi Jinping's diplomatic tour has reached Rwanda. This is the first time a Chinese head of state has visited the country. But more than 4 decades of cooperation have seen Chinese entrepreneurs contributing to Rwanda's economic and social development, and also to Made in Rwanda, the country's campaign aimed at boosting its own industries. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame is currently serving as chair of the African Union, and both sides are looking to deepen trust, boost personnel exchanges, and share experiences on governance and keep close contact in global and regional affairs. What areas of cooperation are most productive between China and Rwanda? What can this trip do for the next stages of progress? What does a more dynamic China-Africa relationship mean for the world? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Zhang Yongpeng from the Institute of West Asian and African Studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Han Wanji Reda, CEO of Development Reimagined, and Amin Gasagara, Secretary of the Rwanda Community Abroad in China. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to Dialogue. Now, what do you think of our relationship with Rwanda? I mean, between the PRC and the very promising land in the sub-Saharan region, despite the negative impact of the war that took place in 1994.
I think since 1994, under the leadership of President Paul Kagame, great changes have taken place in this small country, but densely populated country. First of all, after that massacre, since it happened in 1994, the president has taken, and his government has established a series of the policies to make the stability of the nation, of the country. And first of all, and they held the first National Conciliation Congress at that time. And then they pushed forward the policies to promote the economic growth and the national conciliation policies. And quite a lot of the and following it is the judgment of for the massacre criminals. And after these series of policies, the country has coming into a very good circulation, whether in the political side or in the economic side. And I think now the country has been completely in a normal track for its development, and especially Rwanda has a very clear government. You know, almost
you mean a clean government?
Yeah, clean government. Clean government. Yeah. Little corruption happened, and I once stayed in 1 month in Rwanda at that time to conduct some research project, and I know that. Of course, this is I know from our Rwanda friend, and they told me that if some of the hired official, for example, the head of the state or region, have some clues of corruption, and he will be fired, right? And no doubt.
You mean they have an independent media to supervise the conduct of the government officials?
Yes, yes.
What do you think of the press, the role of the press in exercising oversight about the behavior of government officials? Because as a developing country, many Chinese are discussing whether your democratic transformation, post-war reconstruction will help maintain the integrity of the government.
Thank you. As the professor just mentioned, I would start by saying that now Rwanda is a zero tolerant of corruption. We don't tolerate corruption. And now, not to highlight on a smaller scale, from big to small, everyone have come to understand the use of self-acknowledge of that policy, and everyone knows the bad of corruption. Because if you don't, for instance, if you don't give the taxes, that's for the common
You mean tax
knowledge.
evasion?
Yeah.
Would be very serious
Everyone
crime.
have come to understand the use of prevention of that corruption. And that means
We've heard many stories about the integrity of your government, but what's behind this house cleaning campaign? Is it the role of the media, or do you have a very strong opposition supervisory force in the parliament? What is it that has made it easier for the population of the whole country, including, of course, government officials, to spontaneously and voluntarily protect the image of integrity?
I think you all started from the government voice, but then the government voice have to just not say that we should eradicate corruption, but also say why we should eradicate it. What are the consequences? Then from the consequences that we have seen from previous examples, even the smallest population available on the smallest scale can see the consequences. Then it's easy to deal with it. I think that's the main issue.
Still, I'm a bit disappointed about this reply concerning the role of the media and opposition forces in the parliament. Do you think these are the driving force for the remarkable progress in exercising social governance?
Well, stability is something which is up to a lot of interpretation. The good thing about Rwanda is it's been a stable government, and that means that it's been able to bring together lots of resources. As a Kenyan, where we have a lot of corruption, unfortunately, there's many cases all the time, and we have a very free media, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of those problems. So it's very difficult to say what is the right answer for an economy. Rwanda is growing very well. It has, well, it's been growing very fast. And more recently, the growth has been slowing down, but nevertheless, the government is really trying to attract a lot of investment, a lot of economic development, and this is going to be very important for the future of the country. And so having an understanding, I think, internationally that it is a country which is moving forward, is moving ahead. You know, you go to Rwanda, it's a very clean, organized place, very high security, of course, in comparison to somewhere like Kenya or even Ethiopia in some ways. But nevertheless, it is a very great environment to be. So there's a lot of attraction.
Many in the world have been misguided by negative media coverage on African problems. I guess you know what I mean. African problems since the end of the Second World War. Now, when we look at the success of Rwanda, be it post-war reconstruction or national reconciliation, we look at several issues. For example, what's special about the leadership of Kigali, the capital, or what can you tell us about the charisma and leadership of President Paul Kagame? What are the major reasons behind their success?
Yeah, I think
or is it because of the small sizes like city-state of Singapore, small and therefore easier to run?
Comparatively speaking, Singapore is a city, right? But also densely popularized. But comparatively, the square meters of Rwanda is so bigger than more bigger,
Singapore.
yeah, bigger than Singapore, and so also densely and filled with hills. And
rolling hills.
Yeah, roll up and down, always, even in the capital city area.
Are you suggesting that it is therefore very difficult to construct a railway?
Yes,
this country depends on roads to
yes,
connect the country with the rest of Africa.
That's one of the major reasons. That up to now they have only roads and no railways. I think that's the most important. And by the way, on the other hand, Singapore is a port city, right? But Rwanda is a landlocked country. It's not easy to be connected with the outside world, and so that's a problem. But even so, right, Rwanda has taken some very flexible development policies in promoting, for example, coffee and the factories, and exporting to whereas other parts of the world up to now, right?
Yeah,
and a very famous brand up to now.
Yes.
And so this is one of the major pillar of the economy. And some of the other aspects of the
But
policy
still I'm
could also
wondering
be
aloud
conducted.
why a country that depends on agricultural produce for so much of its GDP growth could develop so quickly. I mean, unless you have a massive overseas investment, domestic consumption, you have rich resources, you can hardly imagine that a country small like Rwanda would grow so quickly. Because after all, the war wreaked havoc with your country, but you were able to walk out of the shadow and engineered the economic miracles. What's special about the leadership of President Paul Kagame?
Well, no, we cannot fail to highlight the visionary leadership of His Excellency Paul Kagame, which is really led to develop the country from ashes where he was coming from, and but now see where he is. But one thing I can also highlight here is, as you say, that it's a landlocked country, but then you cannot fail to understand its geographical position in Africa, which is the center. That means you're going to connect the west to the southern part, from the northern to the south. So I think that also have a very huge importance in how the country is moving, even if we still have low percentage of trade between countries in Africa. But then let's see that it's going to come soon. But recalling again on the leadership, I think Rwanda has just been basing on the smallest thing or the tiniest thing we have inside the country. Make sure we perfect them, make sure it's efficient to be sold on the market, inside and outside.
Alongside the changes in terms of anti-corruption and so on, what the leadership has also been trying to do is to make government more efficient. So, and especially doing business in Rwanda much more efficient. So Rwanda is now the second best country for doing business, according to the World Bank indicators, in the continent, after Mauritius.
Yes.
And if you look at in detail at some of those policies that Rwanda has put in place, these are policies which are aimed at bringing in more investment in order to grow further. I think, in a way, in some time for a lot of economies, it's easier to begin from a small base and then move. The issue is now. The issue is the transformation that Rwanda needs to make now and to continue that growth. That is the biggest challenge that the government is faced with now and the people of Rwanda are faced with now. And so it's how to attract investment into a landlocked country, how to sell Rwanda even to Chinese investors. This is it's quite a challenge, but with things like new special economic zones, Rwanda has one special economic zone, the Kigali Special Economic Zone, currently around 30 or so enterprises there, both domestic and international, which is great. It's a very interesting example of a very nice mix. But they're also planning to build more, and especially to make sure that those industrial parks, special economic zones, run very well, run very efficiently, so that it can define itself in comparison to the neighbors.
The industrial parks in both Suzhou, Jiangsu province, and Chongqing, between Singapore and China, are also successful cases in point. You are watching dialogue with two African experts and the Chinese expert of African studies talking about the tour of President Xi Jinping of Rwanda, the first of its kind by head of state from the PRC. When we come back, we'll take a quick look at the portions of my interviews from 2001 and 2006 with Rwanda's President Paul Kagame. Well, mind you, the image of mine is very different from how I look today. Over 3 decades back, the Chinese government's economic cooperation with African countries was unconditional and very generous, but now some African friends say that the Chinese government is developing a much more realistic attitude towards trade and economic cooperation with not only African countries but many other governments or nations as well. So do you have this feeling, similar feeling?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't mind about that happening.
Africans should work very hard. They should struggle to meet certain standards required in terms of trade and investment, and I don't see anything wrong with China being realistic with the rest of the world. All we need is to be able to carry out trade and investment in fairness, in mutual respect, in both sides working for the common interest of moving forward. I see nothing wrong really with that. Even if it was happening, I see nothing wrong.
Many African friends are talking about learning from China, given the fact that China is developing so fast over the past 2 decades. But on the other hand, the Chinese authorities say politely, hey, you've got to take a second look and give it a second thought, because our national conditions are different from the African continent.
Well, I think here there are always similarities and differences in different situations you look at. But what we are looking at today, of course China might be right to tell Africa to watch out, or to not just take things without first understanding the consequences or the impact they are going to have, because there are different conditions in China than those in Africa. But the most important thing is to take ownership, and I think China is right to be asking Africa to take care of its own destiny. For example, for economic development to take place, for peace and security to be in any parts of our continent, it's up to we Africans to really work on issues of governance, of democratization, of stabilizing the social and economic situation, in order for the activities we engage in with China to be of benefit to Africa, to our people. So we have a lot to do, and once you set the stage, you've really built the foundation where there is peace and stability and there is good governance, then economic activities will take place and will bring greater benefits to the people. And I think that's the message I get from what people might be saying. Well, don't swallow everything you find here. You just try to think about what works for you and what may not work for you. And that is really to sort out, as long as we are careful indeed and are doing the right things. There are things that are common to all of us. If we are talking about good economic management, if you are talking about good governance, if you are talking about peace and security, these are issues that are required all over the world, are required for economic growth and development to take place. So, indeed, I think that's what it means.
In the case of Southeast Asian Association, I mean the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, countries with different levels of economic development are able to get united and rally behind the single banner of having the regional integration. Do you think similar cases are being studied and examined closely in Africa to emphasize the importance of achieving the African unity in their attempt to face their common threats and challenges?
That is a similarity that is there and is very important, and it works in all situations. Certainly unity, integration is extremely important. It gives, it creates economies of scale. It also creates huge markets. It creates a strong voice, and so on and so forth. There is no doubt about that. And in Africa, it is beginning to come up. We have the reformed Unity of Africa. It used to be Organization of African Unity. It was reformed to
African Union, reflecting new realities of our continent and the relationship between our continent and the rest of the world. And we have the new partnership for Africa's development as well. We have regional groupings, economic groupings that are developing possibly in the near future into political groupings and federations as well.
Welcome back. It seems we have something like a common market in East Africa between Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. Hannah, you are from Kenya, right?
Yes.
What can you tell us about the success of the regional cooperation?
Well, it's been up and down, really. And on trade, for example, it is improving and improving all the time. The countries, as you mentioned, are part of the East African community. And there are, for example, a number of harmonized trade rules which have been taking place, a lot of negotiations, and those have really made some big changes, for example, to controls at the border, costs, bringing down the costs at the border between, for example, Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya, and even Tanzania as well. But there's still a long way to go, and in particular with relation to Chinese support and Chinese investment. Take the Kenya standard gauge railway as an example, and there's also a standard gauge railway which is being started in Tanzania. The idea of the standard gauge railway for Kenya was to move across from Kenya to Uganda all the way to Rwanda, and that's absolutely critical for investment and for what I was speaking about earlier, the industrial parks to work in a smooth way. But the negotiations for the regional standard gauge railway have been slow, and so this is something which means that even for Kenya, the business case for the standard gauge railway is not as strong as it would be if we had concurrent investments in those in the other parts of the railway. And a similar issue is there with regard to the Rwanda-Tanzania route as well. So there could be more coordination, and especially with regards to taking advantage of this opportunity that the Chinese investment, Chinese interest, Chinese support for infrastructure provides.
Professor Zhang, do you think inter-regional cooperation, like the success story of ASEAN, would help Rwanda to pick up economically?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and up till now, China could do a lot under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. And up to now, the railway has been, the railway you mentioned just now has been built from Nairobi to Mombasa, and plus another railway that was completed in 1976, Tanzania Railway. And these two connections, the latter could be updated, I think, later. And plus these two, and we have the Chinese side. We have a vision that is later this Mombasa to Nairobi railway will be expanded into the inner part of the Uganda and further to Rwanda, and some of the Central African countries. And so this is a big leap for the connectivity of the African continent, especially the Horn of Africa area and the central part of the African, I think, Great Lake areas of the African continent. I think this is of great significance.
China has become the biggest trading partner of Rwanda and indeed many other countries in this continent. It's not a big surprise. But do you think major countries like India are also competing for regional influence as part of their strategy in Africa? Do you think India is strengthening its presence and strongholds by, for example, reaching a military framework agreement with Rwanda?
As a matter of fact, I think any involvement it might bring slow or fast improvement, but as long as there is an improvement in addition to what they were having, I think I count it as a plus. So I see it as a positive move. Yes.
You don't see that as a geopolitical or geoeconomic competition between major powers in your continent?
I mean, as a developing country, we need competition is good, and you don't have to fear. As long as you choose
You
one
benefit
thing.
a lot from the major power competitions.
A lot. I mean, we're dealing with comparison. As you're dealing with quality, you have to go with comparison. So I think involvement of not only one country, but different countries. So it's a good thing.
Fundamentally, we want more.
Yes.
More investment from everybody. Africa is still only 4% of major trade, 2% of global investment. We need a lot more from everybody.
There's no question that President Paul Kagame will go down history as one of the greatest politicians in our living memory in Africa. But when we look at the glow of political superstars in this dynamic continent, Nelson Mandela is, of course, one of them. He may top the ranking. This year witnessed the 100th anniversary of his birth. So do you think Paul Kagame could be listed as one of the top 5 or top 10, given his track record as a leader that engineers the development of such a small economy?
Yeah, I think at least maybe most probably Paul Kagame could be listed as the top 5.
Top 5.
Yeah, and I think comparatively when in 1994 the new South Africa established, and when Mandela come to power as the president of South Africa, and he set up a very good example of reconciliation of the nation, unity, the national unity, and also give a good example of non-violence, and to try to seek the unity of the country and the unity and or coordination of between different ethnic groups, right? And try to relieve the contradictions in terms of the between different ethnic groups. And so this is a good behavior and example to set for all of the African leaders. And because in the African continent, among all the African continents, majority have some conflicts happened in a majority of the African countries, and especially by the end of the Cold War. So this is a good example to show a good potential or hope for the African continent.
President Kagame becomes the president of African Union on a rotating basis, of course. Now, very quickly, what do you think of the role and success of African Union?
I think the success is predictable. As we have seen, Rwanda has been a good example on a smaller scale. From a few years, we can say last 25 years, as I said, coming from ashes and seeing what we have tried to achieve. We cannot say that it's big because we are dreaming more, but it's a good example. And I think many African countries, we have seen examples of many government sending officials to Rwanda to take example of what is happening, taking on ground. So I think it's promising. It's promising, and we are dedicated. Yeah, and Rwanda is willing to give everything. Yeah.
We keep our fingers for the success of African Union when the future of European Union is called into question, given the rise of populism and protectionism, particularly the rise of a far-right movement. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.